So welcome. I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, Prescription for Your Transformation, Real People, Real Conversations, and Real Success. And as I'm just finishing up the complete setup over here on my other screen, I feel a little rusty today. It's been a while, and just found out from Sedona that she's been missing me. It's been about 3 or 4 weeks since we last had our show, and I feel rusty. And there's a reason for all this, and a lot's been happening, and but I'm glad to be back, and really glad to be talking to Jessica Tomlinson from jesstomlinson.com, a person of importance. And importance, why? Because I've had a previous interview with her, and which is absolutely wonderful, which I learned quite a few wonderful things from you. And that's being bold, going out there in life and finding that boldness within you so that you can deliver what it is that you want to deliver in life and live the magnificence that's available to you because it's also within you. And what I really appreciate about Jess, and this is honestly something that I don't hear too often, and that's her real desire, and I resonate with this totally, her real desire to help others have their voices heard, but in such a way that really makes a real difference. As she mentioned to me right before the show, you can be writing things on paper, but there's still a mask. It's still incomplete. You could do a podcast, and it's still incomplete. There's too many layers that can cover all of that. But when you see the genuine, person, the genuine expressions, because so much of our communication comes from our expressions, from the body language, from our intonation, and all these things, the message is going to be completely different, and will be even more complete. And so in today's world, when we have access to so much information out there, the question is credibility. How much of this information is really credible? And sometimes, just reading something will not allow you to have this intuitive impulse that says, yes, I resonate with this, I connect with this, I believe in this, and I want this. And that's what Jessica is going to be able to deliver in her new business. So welcome, Jess. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Bart. Wow, I've never heard what I do summarized in such a great way. Like, I'm inspired.
Well, good. Well, I'm inspired too. So let's dial it back a little bit, and what I want to share with people today is, what is it that they're going to find out? So, what is the purpose of this messaging, and then and how can we actually create it and deliver it? How can people find you as well? What's the real significance of the process of messaging, if you will, because I'm not sure most people understand it, and many people are not willing to go through that process. But let's go ahead and start first with your past. And at the age of 12, you had a very interesting experience.
I did, yeah. I really started out a lot of my childhood learning hard work very early on. My grandparents, they live in Eastern Oregon and have 21 acres of cherries. They actually have apples as well, but they lease those out to another farmer. But I jumped into the family business to, get money to buy my first car, essentially. That was my motivation. Um, but at that early age of 12, where most people aren't even working, I was out there in harvest, actually managing people and managing the flow um, of this whole harvest, where cherries were being picked, and I had to keep track of all the different boxes that all the pickers picked. And, this is their livelihood and their income. And so I got yelled at quite a bit and got to experience, just what it's like to really, oversee kind of like a big production, and feel connected, I would say, um, to food. How many people actually get to feel connected to our food? I know you can appreciate that as a doctor, like the nourishment of our body. Um, and yeah, so that was a really good experience that has helped me a lot in my life to appreciate hard work, dedication, what it takes as well to own your own business, even though my business is completely different than my grandparents with the orchard. Mine is all, kind of like looks cushy compared to that. But
What was it
still,
like? I mean, it's kind of managing all these adults. I mean, how did they treat you at that time? I mean, what was that like?
yeah, it was really cool because I got so many different lessons. Like, first of all, there was a lot of, I would say, respect because I was literally the one punching, cards for each picker. And sometimes the families would be together, all, picking on different rows. And so there was a lot of respect because they knew that my job was important. Um, and yet there was a lot of me having to learn at a very early age how to communicate um, at kind of a high level, I guess, for a kid when I never really thought of it like that. So I'm having this realization right now. But when they would be, upset because maybe I got something wrong, um, like I really had to hold my ground because I knew I was doing a good job and I had like triple checked everything. So yeah, I would say it was kind of both. Like I got these two lessons of like what it was like to be valued, and also what it was like to have to stand my ground, and know that,
And
even though
and
our
that's one
ages were
thing.
different.
And that's one thing I do appreciate about you because we went to New Zealand together, and certainly with our first interview about boldness, and I think that's probably has the genesis from those experiences because you seem very grounded and you see the opportunity as well. Another person that always impresses me is Sedona, of course, because of where she's at right now. And so I'm going to ask you the question. What were you doing when you were 12? Do you remember?
Yeah, when I was, it's funny, I actually was also working when I was 12.
Oh, really?
I was training to be a dance teacher at my studio, and I did it mostly, well, yeah, I guess technically at the time I was doing it for trade. So I got solo private lessons and learned competition dances that I competed by myself um, in exchange for teaching the pre-K classes and the little like tap and ballet classes. And then that led me to a job at the studio that I had from when I was about, I think I was 15 to 18.
Wow.
But Cherry sounds more fun. Cherry sounds.
I don't
So,
know.
so
I was dancing at that same time too, and I think I liked dancing a lot more than working outside in the hot heat.
all
That's
right.
true.
Well, you guys can trade the next life, so you can just trade.
There you
Um,
go.
so interesting enough, you have now developed into a different field, which is coaching and really helping people, get their message out there. And why is that so important to you? What is it about helping people get their message out there that is so important to you? I'm curious.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for asking. Um, I think it goes back to childhood because even though I had kind of these really um awesome lessons, working in harvest and the cherry orchards, I didn't always feel like my voice mattered. Actually, there's a very specific incident. This just shows, like, if you're a teacher out there, you make a difference in people's lives because I still have this memory, right? Yeah, Sedona's like, yes. I was in fifth grade and I've always kind of been in leadership positions, but I was producing the like yearbook for that year, and something happened in the hallway, and somehow I got to be the one in trouble for like breaking the rules, and I didn't understand what was happening. But a teacher essentially said that I was like being bad, quote unquote, and my actual teacher believed that, and she actually called me a liar when I said I didn't do anything wrong, and I was trying to hold my ground, and I was just appalled, and that really, like, I would say that was probably the first moment that like shut me down, because as my mom would say, I've always been like, very vocal and kind of leading the group. And when I was in preschool, I was like, I came into preschool and I was like bossing everybody around and telling them this is what we're going to do and this is the game we're playing. But So fifth grade, it was like I got shut down, and I really respected this teacher, and I couldn't believe that she didn't believe me. And so I would say now, as my kind of coaching career has developed, I started out in marketing in my corporate career, so which is messaging, but it's a form of messaging and sales. Um, and now really helping entrepreneurs get their voices out there. I would say that's probably really tied to me not feeling like I had a voice that was valued and could be heard.
Love it. And what's true today is that I think there's two very major, or the two major elements in life that I think most people are missing out on. And one is, knowing what their compelling future is, knowing what's really out there, knowing what potential is within themselves so that they can become everything that they can become. But the other one is being witnessed, being heard. And it's tempting to just fall with the rest of the herd, because as soon as your voice comes out, then you may lose a lot of friends, or you may find a bunch of new enemies. And I think it's very, very scary. It's very scary to really be outspoken. And look what's happened in the past. Look at Socrates, for example. I mean, he died because he didn't want to answer certain questions. And so the challenge then is helping people, I'm sure, in identifying with their personal message.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you have a particular strategy that you now use so that people can actually, I mean, this is what I would do. So I don't know what you do, right?
Yeah.
But as a coach, this is what I'm thinking. And this is the purpose of this platform too, is just to be creative. But do you start them with finding out who they really are as a person, so that they can really identify with that message? I mean, that must be a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, so because I help business owners, they usually have something that they are in the field of, right? So they're like focusing on either helping other people with business, or they're in the health area, or, you know, women's empowerment, or there's so many different areas. So I really focus on starting with that. So they usually have some sort of sense like what they care about. But what my passion is pulling out that bold message, as we talked about, in the last interview. And the way that I pull that out is actually counterintuitive to what a lot of people that want to help might think, because they've got big hearts. And so my way of actually pulling it out of them is asking them what pisses them off. And they're like, no, I don't want it. Like, nothing pisses me off. Like, I want to help. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, this is where the juice is. Because if something pisses you off, especially in your industry or whatever you care about, and you notice that emotion, that actually is a sign that you really care. And that's the fire that oftentimes we ignore, that could be the very thing that sets your message apart. So
Interesting. All right,
yeah.
so Donna, what pisses you off? And it doesn't have to be about the radio station.
Nothing here, but yeah, I totally agree with that. I had a couple instances in high school where I had, what really, really upset me was another teacher incident. I felt like my one of our dance teachers at school was not engaged enough in the classes. It was really student run, and then she would try to jump into things once there was a problem and there was no prevention of that, or like you have to be involved and know what's going on to be able to solve the problem. And so that's what upset me the most, is that she was never present. So when there was a problem, it was still up to you to solve it. And not that life isn't like that, but when you're learning how to communicate with people and you're learning those leadership positions when you first start out, it would have been a little bit nicer to have somebody that didn't make your job that much harder when they're supposed to be your teacher and they're supposed to be your mentor. Mhm.
It's interesting when people call someone else out for whatever reason. Um, you know, I have begun to look at it in a different way than in the past. And in the past, it would be, this is just ignorance, this is judgment, this is all these different things, perhaps fear. Ultimately, these people are hurting. They're hurting in one way or another, and they're just expressing themselves or manifesting, whatever intention they think they have in such a way that hopefully, creates a positive result for them. Typically, it doesn't, but that's really the problem. And so the same thing with what you're saying, Jess, is that, whatever's pissing somebody off, in essence, there's an injustice in their life.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because I've had a very privileged life. I grew up in 5 different countries and a very affluent family, and had tremendous education. And oftentimes I would kind of wonder, well, shoot, I haven't had enough traumas to be successful, so I guess I'm never going to be successful. And when you look at people that, are really pissed off or, have had tremendous challenges. And I
Mhm.
think a great example is Tony Robbins. I mean, if you hear his story, it's like, wow, this is intense.
Yeah.
And other people are likewise. And look how successful they are. And
Mhm.
so it's an interesting approach. I love it, Jess, in that, finding out what angers people, because that's then that drive for them to want to make a difference in the world.
Mhm.
And so what's the next step? What's your next step with your clients and in getting that identity and then getting that message out there?
Yeah. So, and I think you make a great point too. It's like, because I used to feel that way. I'm like, oh, I haven't had any struggles. I mean, now, like in my life, I've had lots of struggles. It's just all happened to come in my 30s. um, go figure. But I think it's really about being able to transform things that upset you, and it doesn't have to be like, screw the world because this is my life in this certain way. It can just be little subtle things too that you're just like, oh, I didn't like what that person was saying. I actually disagree. And then diving a little bit deeper and saying, well, okay, but why? Like, here's why. And then transforming it into a message that is now what you stand for versus what you're upset about. That's the difference. And I see people make that mistake way too often. And you don't move people to change or, follow you if you're an entrepreneur and you want to get clients or, whatever you're putting out there in the world. If you're just spewing anger, you get them to follow you by really a few things. So like rational explanations, which work for some people. So like statistics, or like, statistics show that this is um, why this is happening, or emotions. I tend to be more the like emotional driven, right? And it's important to use both. So after that, after we kind of like we reclaim the emotion, the next step that I use with people is to start to uncover what makes them unique in particular. Because when you're communicating, the most important thing is you authentically communicating from a place that's real for you and true for you. So let me explain what I'm saying. Basically, early on in my career, I used to do a lot of videos, and I was pretty good on like, on camera and have really good presence. But I wasn't actually making a difference, and nobody was wanting to work with me or join me in my big mission. And I was really confused by that, until I had a humongous business failure and really had to take a look at myself and realize that I was a great performer. I was great at putting on a mask. I wasn't so awesome at being authentic and real. And so that's like what really jazzes me up. So once you have a message, like, how do you communicate that in a way that's authentic and real for you? And the problem is most people don't even realize what's authentic to them because they've been playing the game to stay safe based on society's rules or the way they grew up, or past, romantic relationships. We've been taught to be a certain way to receive love. And
Yeah,
so that tends
yeah.
to block us. Yeah.
And I think you're spot on. I think what happens is that we're conditioned such a way, and it's all become unconscious. Growing up from being that small child into what you can't do all the time, and so you're put into this tight corridor of what's supposed to be normal for you, so that you become accepted, or you are loved. And as you and I know, that our greatest fear is fear of rejection, or fear of not being enough. And so it's so interesting when you watch people communicate, and particularly in relationships, how often people will not speak their truth. And in essence, that relationship, and truthfully, I mean, we have a relationship with everyone. And so unless we're truthful with that other person, where we also begin to own our own stuff at first, and I think that's the key as well, then we don't have a real relationship. And I think that's why my favorite word today, and today I mean this week, this month, this year, these years, is authenticity. And it's also the reason for this platform, because it's very hard to hide your authenticity, or lack of it. Or let me rephrase it. It's very hard to hide your lack of authenticity on video and a setup like this. And so naturally, and the way that I structure this platform is really about hearing your voice. It doesn't matter if anybody agrees with it. It doesn't matter if I agree with it. I mean, I hope Sedona will agree with it, but but
Okay,
the
she
truth,
doesn't.
yeah, no, she's amazing. She's so smart. I'm so proud of her. I respect her so much. And she's going to be like own her own company one of these days. That's my guess, right?
Hopefully.
Awesome.
No, you will. So, but it really starts off with owning that identity and being happy with it. Like I talked in New Zealand, and we're talking a little bit about New Zealand, by the way. But what I talked about New Zealand is, having permission to be yourself. And I think too often we don't give ourselves permission just to be ourselves, and not make it that, we're perfectly imperfect. I think that's just a complete oxymoron. That just makes absolutely no sense. Right. And that's, for me, that's kind of not even owning the fact that you have faults. I rather just say straight out, look, I've got my faults. Great. Awesome. I don't like them. And
Yeah.
guess what? I'm gonna work on them. I'm gonna do them. But unless you own those things and are okay with them, and you don't have to hide them, the truth is I don't have to share them with you.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're doing is great, is that you're helping people understand what's powerful about them, where that boldness is, and where their flow is. And I don't know if you do anything in NLP, but there's a great assessment called flow dynamics, where we just focus on where your flow is. Why stay stuck with what's not great in you? Find out what's great in you and make it even better. And that's why I love what you're doing, is helping people identify the greatness within them, because that's what people want. And you said to me earlier, getting people out of their own judgment, and inspiring others with a great message, because that's what people are looking for, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If we could all just peel back the layers, and this is way easier said than done, but if we could just peel back the layers and show who we really are, we'd be really surprised, actually. I think a lot of times we think that we're protecting other people. But people are so concerned about themselves, honestly. Like, we need to stop worrying about everybody else and just, take responsibility for ourselves, and just share these parts of ourselves, who we are. And like, yes, I'm a stand for people being really bold, but sometimes people are like in extreme boldness, and they actually need that the authenticity for them is like to sink more into their vulnerability, right? Of just like, it's okay to like take down that wall, to show that you're human, because we're all just, these bozos on the bus anyways, as Wavy Gravy, the
Yep.
activist, said. I love that. quote.
Bozos on the bus, and I've used that one many times, by the way. And so thank you for that one.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about all this, Sedona? Just curious what you're thinking.
Well, I was thinking about what you said about Jess. You said something that sometimes we think we're thinking about each other, and I think that happens very often. But I think you can also kind of trick yourself into thinking you're caring about somebody else, but really it's something deep seated in yourself that you're not over yet. And I've experienced that a lot. Sometimes you walk up to people and they feel the need to tell you tell you their life story without actually telling you anything that happened, and you can just tell by the way that people talk to you that they've either really seen some messed up stuff or they're trying really really hard to get over something. And I think that's very interesting that some people aren't necessarily intact with that in themselves, but that other humans can recognize it. And I think it's something that kind of draws us all together and back to the same, like you said, we're all the same. We're all just human.
You know, it's interesting. You're both saying something very similar, and I recently had, I don't know if you remember, Trevor Crane, Sedona, and one of the things he said is that, you know, when you look at Facebook and everybody says all these wonderful things, and you know, and it's like, okay, yeah, whatever. But when you show your vulnerability, when you show your pain, you know, people really respond. And I think you're right. And one of the things that I know that's very important for you is building community. And that's how we build community. It's when people honestly share, not with a purpose to get that attention, not with the purpose to get something, so to speak, but just say, hey guys, look, I'm in pain right now, and this is why, and I just have to let it out, versus, you know, trying to get all the attention and be the victim, and so poor me, poor me, poor me. I think that's quite revealing, and it's scary too, because you know, you have a lot of people say, oh yeah, there's that guy with all of his problems again, sort of thing. And
Yeah.
when in truth, we all have problems. And a lot of us, I just did some coaching sessions in the last 2 days, and it's all about the inability of people to share, even with their intimate partners, you know, the pain and the trauma and the hurts and the fears that they have, because they're scared to, you know, be judged and scared to be rejected. So Jess, how do you help people not get wrapped up in their story? Because I think that point, what Sedona said, is key. I mean, people do get wrapped up in the story, and nobody wants to hear the story.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's true, that nobody wants to hear the story. But we tell ourselves that nobody wants to, or we're afraid of being all consuming. I think that for me, I'm always looking for ways of how I can be more in my leadership. So this is not for everybody, right? Like, but I'm committed to living a life where I can learn lessons and grow and be on a spiritual path of really just, I hate the like general terms, like being the best person that I can be, but essentially that's what it is, right? Like I'm learning and growing. So one thing that I think is really important, there's so many points that you guys hit on. My brain's just like spinning. I'm like, there's so many different directions. But what I think is really coming to me right now is, are you familiar with Byron Katie's work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I was interviewed on NPR a few years ago with her, which was really cool. That's like one of my like, woo, I've made it moments.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't really know much about her work at the time, but then I looked deeper into it, and now I realize she's kind of this big deal. And so I think to get out of our own story, as you were asking, her work is really powerful, and it's just a few simple questions. So when we're stuck in a story, um, maybe I'm telling myself I'm not good enough, or that fear of judgment, right? Like, I don't want to put my message out there because I'm going to be judged. Her first question is it true? Is this thought that I'm having actually true? And, you know, you might answer, well, yes or no, like from your, you know, fear brain. But if you really like look down the line, the next question is, can you be certain that it's true? And then most people are like, no. And there's a few more questions if you're like, yes, I can be certain. But you go through, like, I forget the rest of the questions. It just gets a little bit deeper. But it's really a way to kind of like snap us out of like our monkey mind, you know? Because ultimately, I agree with you, Bart, how you were saying, you said something about like we just want to be heard or we're in our pain. I can't remember exactly what you said, but what I heard from that is that everything is either love or a cry for love.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think when we were talking about like following the anger or the emotion and of things that piss us off. But so yeah, so that's my biggest way that I help myself and my clients kind of get out of their own way to uncover the gems underneath like these surface stories, because that's when you become the victim, right? And we want to get under that and actually pull out the gems of like, okay, but what's really going on here? What do I really stand for? How do I move through my own blocks so that I can be more in my authenticity of like saying something helpful, you know?
Yeah, and what I find fascinating with all of this, and my own personal story is kind of, you know, relevant in this way. And I keep on repeating on the show, and Sedona has already, you know, heard me so many times, so you can switch me off right now if you want. It's that, you know, I grew up in 5 countries. I speak 4 languages. I underwent 17 years of training, and the funny thing was I didn't realize what I didn't know. And sometimes things are so incredibly simple that they're staring us in the face. And I'm just simply fascinated, you know, when, you know, why we don't ask these simple questions, the simple questions that you just shared. And really getting, you know, dialing into, okay, what's really true? You know, why are we wasting all this time and all the drama and everything else, you know, when the questions can be relatively simple? And the question that I prefer all the time is, you know, what is it that I really want, really? And in that moment of disturbance, if you will, and then when I catch myself, I was, okay, what is it that I really want? And then tap into, okay, what resources do I have right now to change my state or change my condition? You know, right now it's interesting with this whole Hurricane Irma coming along, and you know, I have to admit I'm relatively well prepared, you know, and I've been prepared for years now. But the truth is that, you know, I'm not getting caught up in all the drama because it's not going to help. And I'm asking myself, what is it that I really want right now? And where do I want to be? And I think if we ask ourselves that question, then we're going to be more grounded to be able to share a message with somebody else, because what we have to say is important. That's also the reason for this platform. You know, I believe your voice, I believe Sedona's voice, nobody else's, by the way, but just you two, you know, that it's important.
Woo, we're going to rule the world.
Yeah. So every week, it's just going to be the 3 of us. So no, our voices are important, you know, and I'm excited, you know, what Sedona is going to do with her whole production company that she's going to build, because she's going to help a lot of people with their own message. You want to say something, Sedona?
Oh no.
You
No,
know,
but that is what I intend to do. What kind of put me in that market or what kind of pushed me into that market was when I was little, there were so many people that would say that like, you know, business is bad. People that are CEOs like don't care or this or that. And there were so many negative stigmas that I was like, you know what? I think I can do that and change that perception a little bit and help people kind of understand like why it's like that and why business is the way it is and why television works the way it does. And I think that it really is, whether you just watch it like at night when you're at home and trying to fall asleep, or you really are super invested in a show, it plays a role in every single person's life. I think there's a lot of messages that you can get across as effectively as you want to on that platform.
No, you're absolutely right. And, you know, we are in a very fortunate time today where everyone globally has access, you know, to these kinds of media. And that's why I use social media right now, just to allow others to have their voice heard. And so one thing I liked about you, Jess, and something, because I asked you earlier, why you do what you do. And I know you've organized 3 TEDx women's events, which I think is amazing. Giving other women the opportunity to have their platform and share their brilliance and their talent. I mean, that's totally cool. But you love helping people who have something to say. But not only that, is bringing people together, creating that community. That's awesome.
Yeah. I I help people predominantly with videos, because I think that it's the next best thing to being together in person. But what I really, really, really think we need more of in this life, and what I love encouraging my clients that I help these videos with to do, is to use videos as a tool to bring people physically together. It's just a way to get your voice out there in a bigger way. But what I really think heals, and what we all need more of, is a physical coming together. I mean, you and I know this, Bart, like even just our tribe that was formed in the 3 weeks or 4 weeks that we were all together, from our New Zealand to Vanuatu to Fiji. Like that's where the physicality of coming together just really builds community. And we don't have enough of it. There's so many people that are isolated or feel like they don't belong. And really, like my biggest mission is not only getting people's voices heard, but having spaces where people feel like they belong and they can be accepted for exactly who they are. And that needs to be run by leaders who understand what it takes to create that kind of an environment. Because I know what it takes, because I had my own women's group, besides the like TEDx women events. That's a little bit different than the groups that I led personally for 4 years, which was all about like not just coming together to network or to give updates, but to share the real stuff. Like this seems like a common thread in this interview, right? Is like what we're all having this conversation about, is how do you just connect on the level of, here's what I'm going through, here's what's happening, here's my real feelings and emotions on this topic. We don't have to agree, but thank you so much for hearing me and supporting me. Yeah, I really believe like we rise together when we come together.
And those are trips in Bali, is that correct?
The women's group that I had was a group in Las Vegas when I was living there, and that was for 4 years. But I did take 2 groups of women in 2015 and 2016 to Bali, and I'm probably doing it again in 2018.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is it just gonna be women this time, or I feel discriminated?
I don't know. I'm in this whole questioning, because Ben, my boyfriend, as you know, Bart, who I
It was
also
awesome.
met
We love Ben.
We love Ben. He's a videographer. So I'm kind of playing with this idea of like, okay, do we, get people together in Bali that are men and women? Since now I have Ben.
But Ben would be very happy and comfortable wearing a skirt, so he can hide with a wig and all that kind of stuff.
That's true, actually, he would.
Yeah, he's very confident. He's a very confident guy. He won't have any problems with that.
Yeah, so we'll see. It's all up in the air. I'd be curious, if people have thoughts on the retreat, what that might look like.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think these kinds of retreats are beautiful things, and unfortunately, they're not always accessible to everyone. And one of the things that I consistently share with people, particularly in relationships, and I'm a fervent believer in really nurturing and strengthening and developing strong relationships even when you're on the rocks. And my belief is that when 2 people come together, if the conditions are right in the very, very beginning, then they should be right later on. I think it's a very unnatural act to be with one person your entire life. You can throw rocks at me if you want. And the only reason being is that there's so much variety in our world. There's so much stimulation, and it's hard to keep people on the same track. But the truth is, the most magnificent thing that can ever happen is that you stay with one partner in your entire life. And you heard the same comment in New Zealand. Beautiful, probably the best comments about relationships that I've ever heard. And she said, you make a choice, you make a decision once to marry, but every day you make that decision to stay married. And the key here then, similar to your retreats and getting community together, is finding a way to honestly being able to communicate with your partner. And there's a beautiful technique out there, if anybody wants to look into it. It's called Imago, I-M-A-G-O. These are workshops originated by Harville Hendricks, a brilliant man and his wife, who wrote the book, Get the Love That You Want. And it's really that opportunity to be witnessed. Again, we're talking about messages. Understanding what your personal message is and delivering that in such a way that other people will accept it, not judge it, but just accept it for what it is. And that is missing, in our lives today. And so very much appreciate what you're doing. And that was our experience in New Zealand. Even more so intense, by the way, which you both are familiar with, is I just came back from Burning Man. Actually, I'm still there, kind of. Spiritually, I'm still in Burning Man. And what's beautiful in that experience is the opportunity just to self-express yourself in any which way that you want to be. So you can be fully yourself, and there's no judgment, or at least no apparent judgment. And it's an incredible opportunity to be expressive, to be witnessed, to be seen, and then, in fact, to also expand. Because the more that we as individuals get to see others being different, everybody in today's world wants to be the same. And I say, no, embrace the difference. That's the beauty of life. That's the beauty of creativity. And that's what we got at Burning Man. But tell me what your experience was in New Zealand. I'm very curious.
Yeah. Well, I love this whole part about the messaging, right? And also being in community, because I think there's some important things here. And before I share my big takeaway from New Zealand, and we all got to live with this indigenous tribe called the Waitaha. I just wanted to give people an option. You mentioned Bart, which I think is great, because I had the same thought that not everybody has access to like going away on these kind of trips. And what I would say is that anybody can bring community together. And that's actually selfishly why I led my women's group in Las Vegas for 4 years. I brought everybody together in my home for 4 entire years, once a month. And all you have to do, I'll tell you my simple format, is you all sit around in a circle. Each person gets an opportunity to share what they're celebrating and then ask for support. And we would do like a potluck and go around the circle. And this kept us together for 4 years. So it can be just, we're talking about that simplicity as well, right? So I just wanted to bring that into this conversation because I think it's so important. And when we were in New Zealand and we got to live at this tribe, we had that beautiful experience of being witnessed and being heard and being able to hold the talking stick and get up. And the cool thing about that I so love is that there was like no limits, right? You could hang on to that stick all day if you wanted and just chalk your ass off. And that was so cool. Like, how freeing. And it was like we all got lost in like time and space, it was boring. I never had that feeling of like, oh my gosh, shut up, you're talking too much. Of course I worried that I was talking too much when I was up there, but like giving ourselves permission to just be witnessed and heard and allow that flow without any interruptions is so needed and is so healing.
Did you cry? Did you cry?
Oh my God, of course. I cried the whole trip, like I was just like emotions all over the place. And then one of my friends, like the day, as you know, Bart, that I'd landed in New Zealand, I found out one of my friends had died, and then my best friend had died a few months before. So it was just like a perfect opportunity to be in community, to release. Whew. to be heard. So powerful.
And also for your friends to be heard.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
That was so special. Yeah. Just felt like they were there with me as angels, really guiding me on that trip.
I'm getting tears in my eyes right now. When I was witnessed, I was crying, and in front of 50 people in that room, something like that. It's like, whoa. I think that's the most I've been witnessed when I'm crying, and it was a beautiful experience. As much as I kind of kept it in, because I'm a man, I got to be strong, right? I can't let but it was obvious, but we were able to get emotional in a way that was very sweet, in a way that was very safe. And my personal belief is that life is emotion. We all talk about it. We kind of circle around and say, yeah, this, that, and the other. And honestly, I wanted to share with you earlier on about your messaging. I mean, really, what you're selling is an emotion. All the analysis. I mean, that's just validation. That's the confirmation afterwards, after you've got your emotion out. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that validates that emotion. But ultimately, it's always about emotion. It's being inspired. It's feeling safe. It's whatever that is. And that's why I like us to think about, having permission to be human, because it also is giving yourself permission to have whatever emotion that you have. So what else did you learn in New Zealand?
Well,
What else?
I want to talk about, I don't know what you're trying to get at, but I want to talk about men and vulnerability and emotions. Can
Sure,
we
go
talk
ahead,
about that
shoot.
real quick? Okay, good. Because I think this is so important. So I didn't know that when I was sharing that a couple of the guys, including my guy apparently, was crying while I was sharing and crying about my friends and just, going through my grieving process. And that like touched me so much. I didn't even notice, I was so in my own kind of stuff. But I think there's this whole amazing conversation, and I appreciate you so much, Bart, for bringing this up about men and women coming together and supporting each other in being in whatever emotions they're experiencing, whether, and women go through this too. We feel like, oh, I must be like strong she woman, and I cannot cry. But culturally, we do have a little bit more permission, a lot more permission, I would say, to cry and be in that state. But what is so amazing to me is, like, I just had the example of this. I did a webinar today about videos, and I was sharing vulnerably about my own experience and, the masks that I've worn on camera where I feel like I need to be smart, or, all these different things that go through my head. And a man signed up to work with me, and he said that the reason he did that was because of my vulnerability, and that he knows that that is going to be powerful for him, to learn how to do that more. So yeah, there's something here. And so I just wanted to bring that into.
Well, let me just add to that. I believe that when people allow themselves to be vulnerable, the right people will also trust you more. Yes, there'll be people out there that will take advantage of that, but the people you want to connect with will trust you because you're allowing to show who you really are as a person. And that's what's missing so much in our life today. And I personally believe, and it's a project that I'll be working on in the future, after I do my own studies about, what is that emotion? Emotion really is a kind of energy currency that we have that really allows us to connect at a level that we can't even consciously understand. And can almost guarantee, I don't remember what you were saying, in New Zealand, but I can almost guarantee that I probably cried as well. And what I'm discovering, it's that connection, that energetic connection with you and your truth and your reality, and feeling whatever experience it is. It doesn't have to be pain. It could be absolute success. I mean, I cry as much with success as I do with pain. And that's a beautiful experience. And there's no words for it, at least none that I'm aware of. And I believe that the more that we can allow ourselves to be connected with all the different emotions, the highs and the lows, be super excited and super sad that will have a fuller life. And, I jokingly said, I mean, I didn't, bawl out in tears, but it was clear that I was crying, but part of it was also maintaining my own composure. Not, part of it was, I wanted to be strong, but the larger part, I would say 90%, maybe 80% was, just I'm sitting in that emotion and okay with it. But most people will deny themselves of it. And that's sad. They'll deny themselves of the highest of highs, because for whatever fear they have, and they'll deny themselves from crying. And I heard, I won't say this correctly, but I remember that there was one sergeant or one soldier at one point, whatever situation, was bawling because of some tragedy that happened. And, all the other soldiers were laughing at him. So, you're not a man. And the sergeant comes in, who's a veteran sergeant, says, look, the only man in this room is the guy who's willing to cry at the situation. So here's the man who's willing to, accept his vulnerability, own his vulnerability, and be courageous in that vulnerability, because it takes courage.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does.
So what's your future? I know a special person is coming down. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I just did.
We can say that. So the future is that, I'm going to continue helping people individually with their presence, their messaging, video strategy for getting their bold messages out into the world. But I also have a new exciting venture with Ben, who is my man, and he's going to be moving from Ashland to Santa Cruz. Whoa! Finally, it feels like it's only been like 3 months since we've been back from this trip, but it feels like a lifetime. So he'll be here in a few months, and we'll be building our visible video production company together, since he's a videographer. And really, like, what I'm so excited, not only the potential to create with the person that I love the most in the world, but to we're both super creative. So there's going to be like some awesome brainstorming creation for visionaries on the way. So that's what I'm most excited about right now. And then potentially Bali. There's a lot of good stuff coming down the pipe. It's been a heck of a year, man. I'm ready for just like anchoring in. I'm like, no more deaths, no more transitions, like. But hey, life it keeps it interesting, right? So who knows? I surrender and trust.
I'm excited about, what you're going to do. And again, it is, the only way that we can make progress in life is if we're getting the right messages, if we're getting the right information. Yeah. And with the onslaught of the media and the digital world and everything else, there's so much information. It's really hard to filter all of that out. And so getting those authentic pieces. And my hope, and we kind of talked about this before, but it was my understanding that, people are not exactly understanding or willing to, spend the money to, create the videos about themselves. And I think one important part is perhaps where people get to discover who they really are. And it was fortunate for me going on these 2 trips, with Live Your List publications. With Robert Evans, is where I was really able to begin to own the space that I was in, because it was required that I was going to speak to others, to share my message, and I could only do that if I was well aligned, that I knew what my ground was, that I was doing with integrity. And as much work as I'd done over the years, and I've done tremendous work in the personal development, it was only in that moment that it was required of me to show myself off. This is who I am. And my hope is in the work that you get to do, partly with helping businesses, that the additional gift that they may not be looking for but that additional gift that you will be able to deliver because of your authenticity, because of who you are, because of the work that you've done, and your awareness, that you're also going to help people discover, who they really are. Because when we're in alignment, we become so much more powerful. And again, that's, you kind of, hesitantly say be the best person that you can be, but it's true. There's 10 times, there's a 20x factor inside of you, in all of us. There's 20 times more. I love the saying, hell on earth if I ever were to meet the man I was meant to be. Hell on earth if I ever meet the man that I was meant to be. So right now I'm just being the man I was meant to be.
Yeah.
And
we just don't know.
Exactly. We don't know what's out there, so you constantly have to keep on looking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that you get to inspire people, and also people who are listening today will be inspired, to reach out to you. So how do people find you?
They can go to my website, jesstomlinson.com, and there's information on how to contact me there. Or they can find me on Facebook if you just type in Jess Tomlinson, my business page pops up. So yeah, I would love to connect over there and have
Awesome.
more of these conversations.
So before I give you the last word, I want a word from Sedona. Any feedback, any thoughts, any additions you want to share?
I would just say that I really like the way that you approach in your method when you're helping people. I think that's really important, and keep doing what you're doing, because we need more people like that in the world.
Thank you.
So, as we wrap it up, I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, Prescription for Your Transformation, real people, real conversations, and real success. Usually we have some technical difficulties. Today we did not. I just had some mental difficulties getting started. Yay! It's been a while. An incredible experience I had at Burning Man, and hopefully I'll get some people from Burning Man on our next show, because it's a beautiful event. It's a very much misunderstood event, but an event that people should hear about and know the truth about it and how wonderful it is about self-expression. And talking about self-expression, Jess, what are your last thoughts, your last words of wisdom that you want to share?
Yeah, my last words of wisdom is something that I like to tell my clients all the time, and that is give yourself permission to be and be good enough.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Sedona, take it away. And I will be back tomorrow on Facebook Live, combined with YouTube using Crowdcast, just the simulcast, which is absolutely beautiful thing. Sedona, thank you so much. And I'll be back next week on the radio.